Hey, Evan.
What?
What do you call a peanut in a spacesuit?
What?
An astronut. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Engage, a family gaming podcast. This is episode 168, and I'm your host, Steven Dutzman. This is the official video game and board game podcast for EngageFamilyGaming.com. EFG is a website where parents like myself and my co-hosts come together to give parents and families the information they need to get their family game on. This week, it's just me and Amanda again. But that's not
horrible and wonderful.
I mean, that's not settling because Amanda and I we do good work. So it's board game week, and this week I thought, Amanda, I had an idea. It tickled my brain while I was in the frozen north this past weekend that maybe the two of us should rap a little bit about the challenges, opportunities, benefits, etc. of competitive play in the board game space. And I think it'll be impossible for us to talk about that without at least touching on esports. Maybe a scotch. So it'll be like a little bit of a hybrid thing, because I think esports will be a part of it, especially since, like Magic is both a paper thing and an esport.
Right.
And they're really like squishing the boundaries. And we've got some other news announcements that I wanted to chat with you about too, and kind of hear your reactions. So before we do that though, I do want to take a moment to thank everybody for listening this week. We hope the games that you've been playing have been great. We want to make our podcast more interactive. So please feel free to reach out to us on social media. You can do that by going to facebook.com/engagefamilygaming or engagefamilygaming.com/Facebook, because we're fancy, and send us a message. Our community manager is on the case. He will make sure that all the feedback gets to me and Amanda so that we can do with it what we will. Topics just don't write themselves anymore. So we would love all the help we can. Although next week, I suspect the topics will write themselves. You just won't be here. It's fine. I'll get it taken. I'll hold down the fort without you. I don't know how I will, but I'll manage. And then when you come back, we'll yell about something, I'm sure.
It's going to be a lot. A lot.
I mean,
happening.
Yeah, there will be a lot happening. I have a feeling that one of two things is going to happen. For those listening, next week is GDC, the Game Developers Conference. It's a video game thing. Amanda is legit, so she gets to go. And so since she's legit and gets to go, that is cool. The downside is she actually has to work at it. That's the downside. I don't have to do that. But the fun thing about GDC is it's a business show, right? It's not a fan-facing event. This is all about the business, middleware. This is where they announce headsets and voice chat software and, companies.
New stuff with Xbox.
New stuff with Xboxes. I mean, but this is also where indies go and network and get publishers. And this is where the rubber meets the road on stuff that we will be excited about in a year or two.
Exactly.
And it goes one of two ways for Engage Family Gaming. GDC is either really, really freaking busy and crazy, or we don't care. So it could go either way. It really depends on what Google and Microsoft want to do.
It's true. Ninty's going to have some good Nindies as well, so
yeah,
I'm going to have my eyeballs on them.
Yeah. So we're going to have stuff to talk about. It just depends on whether or not our podcast is 3 hours long. I mean, that's really what I'm getting at.
It's going to be a lot of yelling.
Yeah. Is it going to turn into, are we going to turn into Giant Bomb? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, all we really have to do is talk about pro wrestling a lot, and because we yell enough, we're close.
It's true.
We're close.
But I don't really like pro wrestling. I like Glow.
That's close enough. That's fine. You know what? At this point, you and I could talk about anything and make it entertaining. I think.
I mean, you're right.
I think I could sell you on, if we went wrestler by wrestler, I think I could sell you on liking at least half a dozen of them. If for nothing else, because of my natural charm and charisma. That's a joke, folks. I don't have any of that. Anyway, so it's board game week. We already talked about it. So let's do the news first, and then we'll get into stuff. So we don't normally do news on this show, but I thought it would be kind of a neat little mix it up thing, we got a new game coming from Restoration Games. Have you heard about it, Amanda?
I might have heard about it. Why don't
Yeah.
you tell me about this Restoration game so that I can tell you whether or not I've heard about it?
So, Restoration Games has a new game called Unmatched, which is a restoration of a game called Star Wars Epic Duels, which is, it came out like during the prequel era. It was a board game, like with miniatures. It was like a small board, miniatures combat game. Was popular, but not like OMG popular.
Tiny tactics game.
Yeah, I think that's a safe way to describe it. And so they got the big key is that the core tenets of Star Wars Epic Duels, like the basic DNA of Star Wars Epic Duels, turned into Heroescape. So this is like Cro-Magnon Man. You know what? Let me make it. Let me take it to like the real level. Like this is Australopithecus afarensis of board games, and then we move to Cro-Magnon Man. Like we're just,
Wow.
and now it's being moved around. That's my anthropology background. I get to use it once every 3 years. I just used it. Put the check
done
mark.
now.
I'm done for a while. So, and the idea is basically they're taking this tiny tactics game. I like the tiny tactics thing. I'm gonna steal that. I'll give you credit. Don't worry.
You don't have to
And so, basically, they're taking out the Star Wars license, obviously, and replacing it with, at least in the initial piece, mythological figures. So I'm just going to read directly from the press release because I have it right here. So this is directly from the press release. Tell me how hype this is. Okay. So Unmatched pits 2 or 4 players against each other, with each player taking the role of their own hero. Each hero is represented by a unique ability and a custom deck of action cards. And each set comes with a double-sided board with different battlefields. The first 2 sets in the line are Battle of Legends Volume 1 and the eponymous Robin Hood versus Bigfoot. Those are the first 2 sets. So Battle of Legends Volume 1, and then the second set is Robin Hood versus Bigfoot. The Battle of Legends set includes King Arthur, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, Medusa, and Sinbad, like the adventurer.
Yeah.
Heroes from any set can be played against each other, making for surprising and exciting matchups and tons of replayability. So the first sets are coming into Gen Con, but later on this year, 2 more packs coming.
Okay.
One of them is Bruce Lee, which I think is amazing. That will be
fantastic.
Collectors will want to hang on to that one. Will want to look out for that one because it will be a limited edition Bruce Lee. And then the second one is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I think will resonate with a certain audience, like maybe you. So are you a Buffy girl?
I sure am. Absolutely.
Were you a Buffy girl while Buffy was happening, or did you happen upon it afterwards?
Nah, I was a Buffy girl when it was happening. I watched the X-Files and Buffy. That was like everything I watched.
So
when I was that age.
My exposure to Buffy the Vampire Slayer was late. I can't remember what season it was. The General's coming in. I'll ask her in a minute what season I started. But like, I started. It was definitely after like the awkward like first 2 seasons.
I liked those first 2 seasons, even though they were super awkward.
Yeah, but I went back and watched them later because of the power of DVD. But like I thought it was so dumb, right? Like I just was convinced that it was stupid, and I was never gonna watch it. I was like, oh, this is just ridiculous. And the General, more or less, was like, if you're gonna make me watch Monday Night Raw, then you're gonna watch Buffy. And I was like, well, I don't really have a choice, so I did. No. And you know what? It was fun. I mean, it was funny. I mean, it's such a cool concept. I am very surprised that they haven't made it, that they haven't rebooted it yet. Like, it feels like the CW would have redone this. Maybe with Arrow going away.
Maybe. There will definitely be more of a budget.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's this new game. I think it's really cool. Restoration games, they have not made a bad thing yet.
It's true, they haven't.
They have a little bit of an advantage, I think, by nature of the fact that they are making games that were already kind of like made already.
Yes, so yeah.
I mean, it gives them.
But they're making them better.
True.
Right.
Yes, but I'm not saying that their job is easy, right? Like I know them, I've worked for them. Full disclosure, when I go to PAX Unplugged, I work at their booth. I spent an entire weekend at PAX Unplugged yelling at people about Fireball Island.
So much yelling. You do so much yelling.
I do. But that's because I get excited. I just get excited.
I know, me too.
Also, it's amazing how easy it is to sell Fireball Island when all you have to do is get people to sign up for a mailing list. It's just so easy. It's so easy. I sold a lot of copies of Downforce for what it's worth. So I learned that I can actually sell stuff. That was what I learned there. So full disclosure, I do work with them on a regular basis. I know them. However, they make good games, undeniably. And they don't make great game boxes, as Fireball Island demonstrated. But whatever. Broken Token will fix that. A little bit of Broken Token box. So, yeah, I think... I just mean, like, they have the advantage of... They can... Because of their business model, they can find games with like good bones. They're like the Chip and Joanna Gaines of board games.
I love that so much.
It works because
that show so much.
I know it. I didn't know that you like that, but it makes sense.
True, I do.
But it also works just on nature. I mean, it works with their title, right? Their Restoration games. They find games that have really good bones, and they're really good at finding that nugget of amazing and pulling it out, right? Like, the only reason Fireball Island was good back in the day was that having that marble roll all over the place and the chaos that it spread. So they just made an entire game around chaos. And so this feels like what it was a freaking epic combat game with a bunch of heroes. Because at the end of the day, that's what Star Wars is. Really? Like... For better or for worse, Star Wars is a way to generate heroes and villains. And they're epic ones at that. And that's what Duels was. It just put those people and just smacked them together. So sure, sounds great. And I'm super interested to see what the Bigfoot deck looks like. Because I don't know what powers that guy would have. So that is unmatched. I think it's also the art that we have seen, and there is some art that I have been privy to that I can't really talk about a lot, but man, this game is going to be real. Yeah, you know what? They did a really good job of picking an art style that like really, it's kind of like Disney Infinity. You know how they took all those different art styles and kind of put them into the same bandwidth? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very similar to that.
Very successful.
Yeah, in the art style.
Okay. No, it actually was fairly successful in general. Disney just doesn't like making video games. I wrote a whole thing about it.
Yeah. I mean, they also really, really liked making Hulk figurines, apparently.
I mean, who doesn't, really?
I mean, yeah, but just... Yeah,
It's a Sunday.
Yeah, we could do... I mean, it's true. Who doesn't like Hulk figurines? Anyway, so that's the first piece of news. The second one... This is a little bit more interesting, and we talked about this a little bit on a special edition of the EFG Daily Commute. But I wanted to run this by you. Have you ever played Magic? I can't remember if we talked about this. I
have. I am actually a Magic tournament winner. I won my first Magic tournament when I was 11. Okay. Then you're familiar. More than familiar. Wait, hold on. This is totally a non sequitur. Jenna, when did I start watching Buffy? What season was it? Was it like halfway through the show?
It was in 2000.
That doesn't help.
Well, you can Google.
Yeah, all right.
You can Google.
Okay, Buffy.
Google is your friend.
So we're going to pause this.
Okay.
This is great radio. Air date. Okay, so when did it start? Started in 97. So I probably started like season 3 or season 4, I guess. Somewhere in there. But then I went back and watched all the earlier ones. And then we watched it like nobody's business until the end. Just because that's what you did. I mean, I think I missed some of it. I think I missed some of it because of video games, but what are you going to do? Anyway, all right, so Magic the Gathering. Are you familiar with Planeswalkers? Have you ever played while Planeswalkers were a thing?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you're familiar with them. Okay, so the current, and you probably saw some of this while you were visiting Hasbro at Toy Fair, so I don't know how much information they gave you. So the current storyline, for those interested, and I'll make this interesting even for non-Magic players, Magic has a story now. This is like their new thing.
Good story.
It's actually... interestingly enough, War of the Spark, which is the next set, is actually going to have a book, a paper, like actual book that you can buy in stores for the first time in years. And so they have a story. It is interesting. I personally think even non-Magic players should check it out just because it's really interesting, like weird fantasy stuff. And it is culminating, this story that's been going on for, I think, 3 or 4 years at this point, is culminating in War of the Spark, which comes out in April. War of the Spark is more or less Magic the Gathering Infinity War. There have been 36 Planeswalkers introduced in Magic the Gathering so far.
Have there really been that many?
There's a lot.
That's a lot, man.
There's a lot. I'm trying to convince the Geek Embassy, which is another site that I work with, to co-run a 36-team bracket with audience voting to decide who is the greatest Planeswalker of all time.
I would participate in this bracket.
Okay, well, good. We gotta find. I mean, we need prizes too, but I'm sure Hasbro would help if I told them.
They probably would.
So there have been 36 Planeswalkers, and so we have news that not only will all 36 of those Planeswalkers appear as new cards in the War of the Spark set, which is unprecedented, because normally Planeswalkers take up a Mythic slot. There's usually only 18 Mythic slots in a set, and usually it was super inside baseball, but usually there's like 3, maybe 4 Planeswalkers. There was one set where there was 5, and the world exploded. They're like, whoa, check out the Gatewatch, which is the Magic the Gathering's version of the Avengers, and there were 5 of them, and it was insane. And Magic the Gathering players remember when there were 5 Planeswalkers, and there were a ton in Standard, and there was a deck called Super Friends that you could play, which was just a bunch of Planeswalkers. So Magic the Gathering, apparently that didn't bother Wizards, because in War of the Spark, not only are all 36 of those cards going to be printed in the same set, every pack is going to have a Planeswalker in it. Every pack is going to have a Planeswalker in it.
Oh, my goodness.
So, for those folks that don't play Magic, everybody who's listened to this has had their kid come home with a random pack of Pokemon cards. So, we'll use this as an illustration. When you open up that pack of Pokemon cards, in that pack, there is always a rare card. There's some uncommon card. They call them different things, but there's like one card that is the most rare, then there's some uncommons, and then there's stuff that is basically, just chaff. It's common stuff, right? And that's how trading cards work, right? You buy a pack, it's random. Some of the cards are more valuable than others by nature of the fact that they are rarer. Every game does it a little bit differently. I met with the Yu-Gi-Oh people at New York Toy Fair and tried to convince them to explain it to me, and my head melted because they have ultra rares and they have certain. It's crazy. Magic, traditionally, there is 1 rare, 3 uncommons, and then the rest are commons. That's how they do it. One of those common slots, it appears, because they've done this before with double-sided cards, and they did it this set. Have you heard the double-sided cards?
No, that's brand new to me.
Okay, so they did this thing with the double-sided cards, which are cards that can transform. In the horror set, when I come to your house, I'll bring a bunch of them to you. So in the horror set, which is set in the world of Innistrad, which is gothic horror, they have werewolves. And so on one side is a human, and on the other side is a werewolf. And they have printed double-sided cards. It's a mechanic. Once they figured out how to do it, and once they were willing to break that fundamental rule that the back of every card has to be the same, and they figured it out for competitive play and everything. Everybody plays with sleeves anyway. But they have ways to do it. They actually make like checklist cards that you can use to be like in the deck as your card. Like you can check it off. Like they figured it out to deal with the logistics. But they're double-faced cards. They have some now in a set where there's an enchantment on one side, and on the other side is a land. Because the enchantment helps you discover the land. That's the flavor of it. So, like, you know, they have that kind of stuff.
Very different meta than what I'm used to, obviously.
It's very different. It's very different. But probably not. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, like, fishes are fishes, you know? Like, it depends on when you played. But it still plays like Magic. But what they do when they have these weird cards, like double-sided cards, is they put one of those in every card, and it takes a common slot. So what they're probably going to do is take up one of the common slots, and then there's just going to be a Planeswalker in every pack. And it's really interesting because I have no idea what that's going to do. I mean, it's going to obviously make drafting that game very different because obviously everyone has... I mean, there's going to be tons of Planeswalkers all over the place. It's very interesting. We've never seen anything like it. And what I'm really interested to see is, you know, how they do all those cards and how they make them different from each other. I mean, the good news is all 36 Planeswalkers thematically are very different. They've done a very good job about that. Because they're all different color combinations. Many of them are multicolored. They all have vastly different mana costs. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Different synergy no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And the ones that are like the same color do different things. They do different things. And so it'll be very interesting to see how they do it. And I'm really interested... really, the way that we were shown all these things is through this amazing stained glass art that showed us what they all look like. And anyone who appreciates good fantasy art needs to go look up War of the Spark stained glass Planeswalkers. And just, if you don't know how to spell Planeswalker, just try.
I may or may not be doing this.
Yeah.
Right this second.
Just type it into Google. Google knows what you're saying, even if you spell it wrong. But I do think we are going to try through the month of, the end of March to do a, excuse me, to do a, 36-team Planeswalker tournament.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the War of the Star stained glass, if you just do that under an image search, it'll...
beautiful.
Yeah, they're amazing. Now, this is not going to be the card art.
But they're gorgeous.
Yeah, I don't know why these aren't
these on my wall.
Oh, yeah. Fun fact. They are all the appropriate size for a phone background.
See what you did there.
Yeah, the only thing, you see what I did there? The only thing that's really holding me back from having it all done now is that there are two of them that apparently people don't know who they are yet. Like they're unclear if that's who they are. But they're guessing just based on clues. I'm sure Reddit has figured it out because nerds.
Bunch of nerds.
I'm not wrong.
No, you're not.
Because I'm sure that
sometimes the best leads on news. So.
Oh, hold on, just a moment. Yes.
Can you make your phone background Jace?
You want me to make it what?
Your phone background is Jace from Magic.
Yeah, I could.
Can you, please?
Oh, you want me to do it now?
Yeah.
I can't do it now. I'm working.
I know, but after this.
After this, yeah, I'll do it. Yes. Bye. Apparently he wants Jace. That's weird.
That's fair.
Mike
loves Jace as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just threw up the horns. because he's playing the division right now.
Yeah, that's is he familiar with the phrase "that's on brand"? Of course,
Yes, he's very familiar with the phrase "that's on brand."
Of course, Mike Futter likes Jace Bellerin. Of course he does. Anyway, so yeah, of course he does. So anyway, for those listening, if you don't like Magic, sorry for the last 5 minutes or so. But I do think everybody should go look at this art. The art is worth the price of admission.
So beautiful.
We are, and the reason we're talking about it, we are spinning up collectible card games as coverage on the site. So we'll be talking about Magic, the Transformers card game, which I just got my box in the mail the other day. And we're
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's really cool. We're going to be unboxing it on Saturday. Me and the whole family unboxing it on Facebook Live on Saturday morning. And
awesome.
And we'll also be talking about Pokemon, and we'll be talking about how to play the games, how to get the cards, what to do with them. We're going to be teaching those that don't know how to know. So just a little bit of a preview. If you have questions about collectible card games, Magic, etc., please send them over to us. We will make sure to have those questions answered. But man, I gotta find the stained glass Jace so I can put that on my phone. Anyway, so that's, for the most part, that's the news. There was some deep cut stuff. Asmodee working with Cool Mini or not. That's a little deep for us, although that's going to have some significant implications for people who own game stores. But it doesn't really impact us so much. So
we are not going into the business of it. 'Cause I've been thinking a lot about it all day, but no.
Yeah, let's take a break, and then we'll come back, and we're going to talk about competitive play.
Yeah, we are.
We'll be back in a minute, folks. So I am here at the Vermont State Magic the Gathering tournament hosted by Quarterstaff Games, and I'm actually here with Ben, who is one of the managers for Quarterstaff. You're also a judge.
Yes.
And you were essentially running the show here today at the tournament. 6 rounds of Swiss, which is the biggest tournament I've finished. Because you don't know, but I'm terrible at Magic the Gathering. But this is the most wins I've ever had.
Awesome.
I think
Congrats.
in total, I think, and I finished 2 and 3 and 1. So, man, listen, I'm starting.
Right on.
My rise to the Pro Tour. It begins today.
Begins today. I like it.
So, one of the reasons I wanted to come here, number one, because I wanted to come with the infinite co-host, my brother, but the other piece was I knew this was going to be a great place to go and bring Evan and have him kind of move into, like, quote-unquote serious Magic tournaments, because as a judge, there's different competitive levels. Friday Night Magic is a little bit different than this. So, what are some of the big differences that people have to be ready for?
Yeah, so most of your store events are going to be run at what they call a regular rules enforcement level, where the event today we decided to run at a competitive rules enforcement level, or REL. And basically what that just means is your actions and stuff have a little bit more weight to them. There's not the kind of sense that, well, I kind of messed up, mind if I take this back? You're kind of held to your decisions within the game. Not to say that opponents won't let you take something back or whatever. Competitive, friendly competition is still very much alive at this level of Magic event. But you really need to think and plan your plays and your deck strategies just a little more.
Yeah, I mean, it also, by nature of the fact, it's a little bit more expensive, a little bit, bigger event. You're going to expect, number one, more competition.
Sure.
I mean, some of the people say, while we're doing this, the top 8 is happening.
Yes.
And the fact that there is a top 8, a lot of smaller events, you just play and you play a certain number of rounds.
Play your 4 rounds and you're done.
And then you're finished. Here, we played 6 rounds, and there's a bunch of people that got to play 2 or 3 more, if they're so lucky. So one of the big differences that I noticed, and admittedly I knew about it, and I forgot to tell Evan about it, was that you have to register your decks at these tournaments. So what's that process like?
So at most events, you're just going to show up and play what you brought, and maybe you can change it in between rounds. Here you are locked into what you brought, and the way to enforce that, to make that fair for everyone, is we require these deck lists. So at the beginning of each event, you're going to take a sheet of paper. It's essentially like a little form. You'll fill out all the cards that you're playing, the number of those cards that you're playing, and that's what you're locked into. And we do counts at the beginning of the day. Make sure you have the proper number of cards.
Yeah.
And then we do random spot deck checks throughout the different rounds as well. We'll pick a table, we'll grab their decks, we'll just compare it against the sheets, make sure everyone's playing what they say they're playing. And that's just a way to ensure fair and tight competition between all the players.
Because the last thing we want is for me to kind of play this, and I was playing a mono blue tempo deck. The last thing we want is for me to just start using Force of Will.
Right.
That would change the game.
Absolutely.
I mean, it would have gotten some interesting looks. It might have been worth getting a game loss just to do it.
At this point, yeah, we might have to remove you from the event.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it might be worth it.
But
it might be worth it for hilarity's sake. But yeah, you definitely get booted.
Yes.
But the look on my opponent's face might have been worth it.
It might have been worth it. And that's something you'd have to weigh and decide if that's for you.
Yeah, do you really want to ruin Steve, do you want to ruin the 4-hour drive and the $30 entry fee for that joke?
And sometimes the joke is worth it.
Sometimes the joke is worth it. What are some other kind of challenges that you think people might have kind of adapting from like a pre-release or Friday Night Magic to like a real competitive event like this?
Magic is a super complex game when you get to the nitty-gritty of the rules interactions. Mm-hmm. The basic mechanics that a lot of people are probably familiar with feel very second nature, but when you start peeling back all these different levels of rules, things can get very ticky-tack. And just being familiar with how your cards interact is the first big step you want to do. Know the cards you're going to play, know the deck you're going to play, and that will alleviate 90% of the issues you would have making that hurdle from a standard store event to a more competitive Magic. Just being familiar with what you have and the tools you brought to the tournament.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to know and read your own stuff.
Right.
But then that next level is you just have to be prepared for the fact that the person sitting across that table is more likely to know exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using a quote-unquote like top-tier strategy.
For
sure. If you found something online, if you're looking at Star City Games and finding those deck lists, they know what's in there.
Yeah.
You know, I was playing a mono blue aggro deck. Everyone knew exactly what I was doing before I did it. I played a single island and one card, and they knew exactly what I was doing. But you have to be ready for that.
Yeah.
You just have to know that they know what you're doing.
Yeah, with the internet and all the coverage that's out there with Magic right now, it's super easy to kind of know what you're going to face coming into these things. And if you do a little bit of research, it can prepare you a lot too. Back when I first started playing Magic, 23 years ago, the internet wasn't a thing yet. So I showed up to my first, competitive event 23 years ago, had no idea what was going on, and promptly, got beat by decks I didn't even know existed. And in this day and age, that's surprise value is much less likely. So
yeah, I didn't expect. I mean, you probably don't expect somebody to come to a tournament like this and like break the meta with like some kind of, and by meta I mean like the meta game, like the interaction between all the different decks. You don't really expect somebody to come here and like just sweep it away with something that no one's ever heard of. I mean, it's not impossible.
It's definitely not impossible.
It's not as common.
For sure, yeah. And just the higher competitive mentality, people do kind of get, I hate to use the word rut, but they definitely follow what the Pro Tour, the Mythic Championships, all the high-level celebrity streamers put out there, and those are what you're going to face. So you can kind of see what's coming in. And if you're willing to bring in that rogue deck and really know how it beats what other people are going to play, you could have a really good day. But you got to know you're going to see all these same high-level decks.
You got to be ready for it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure we'll have more of these chats as you guys have more of these tournaments. We're going to be trying to come up more. So yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, you have a good one, buddy.
You too.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Engage, a family gaming podcast. I'm still Steven. I'm still lucky to be here with Amanda, and we're talking about board games. We just went over some news. We talked about some Magic the Gathering. Now, I think that's a nice segue into talking about competitive play. Both you and I have played competitively in various games throughout our gaming career.
Yes.
Right? So you
told
me. Yeah. So you told me that you played some Warhammer. And you did some of that competitively. And you did before the break. You said that you won your first Magic tournament. And how old were you when you did that?
I was 11.
That's impressive. That's impressive.
Yeah.
You're a prodigy. I don't win Magic tournaments.
I stopped playing sometime after that, so I mean, I'm certainly not a prodigy anymore.
I mean, you could be a prodigy and then quit. I mean, it's fine. Magic is a hard game to keep up with.
It's so hard.
It's hard to keep up with. So I the only game that I've really played really competitively is Magic. But I dreamed when I was younger of playing Street Fighter 4. That's what I wanted to do. But the problem is I'm like really bad. So hence the hashtag Steve is bad at games. That's like literally a thing. We're gonna sell T-shirts. I'll send you one when we have a batch made. So I want to tell a story about taking Evan to his first competitive Magic tournament. Amanda, while I tell this story.
I'm gonna listen. I wish I had cookies.
Okay. And then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna splice in, because I actually interviewed the tournament organizer from Quarterstaff that that ran the tournament that Evan and I went to, and talked to him about some of the stuff that parents should be aware of while they're preparing their kid to go to some of these tournaments, because this is not something you can just drop a kid off and just leave without getting them ready. Because, their competitive Magic tournaments are a little bit different. So, over the weekend, we went to the Vermont State Magic the Gathering Championships, which are different than states, quote-unquote, which used to be run by Star City Games. Star City Games doesn't do that anymore in favor of just running more of their opens. And so Quarterstaff realized that there was no Vermont State Championship, so they just decided to run it. Vermont's small enough they could do that. And so we went up there because my brother, the Infinite co-host, was up there. And so we visited him. We went to the tournament. We spent a whole bunch of time putting together cards, building decks, and talking about how to play and what to do. And so we went, and it was 6 rounds, which was exhausting for Evan. A round is about an hour or so. So it was 6.5 hours of Magic the Gathering, which everybody's like, oh man, boo-hoo to you guys. You had 6.5 hours of playing Magic. And my response to that is, no, but really, guys, it was 6.5 hours of Magic the Gathering. And so at the end of the day, of the 4 of us from Team EFG that went up there, Evan was 3rd amongst the 3 of us. He had some rough games, but he learned a lot of really awesome lessons. The first one is... That's great. Exactly. The first one is, don't let your uncle and dad do your deck registration at the beginning of the tournament, because they will undoubtedly screw it up and earn you a game loss in round 2, that was his lesson. So one of the things and this happens at Magic, and you can talk about it, at Warhammer, and I'm sure we can extrapolate it out to other games too, but at a competitive Magic the Gathering tournament, not like a Friday Night Magic or a pre-release, but at a competitive level tournament, you have to register your deck before the event starts. You fill out your paperwork. You say what cards you have, how many you have, and if you screw that up, there are penalties. So that was a lesson, because I forgot to tell him about that until we got there. That was on me. I just took it for granted that someone had mentioned to him that we had to do paperwork. And his uncle and I were like, "No, it's fine, dude. It's cool. Just set out your cards in groups of 4, and we'll write it all down for you." And man, did we screw it up. Yeah, what are you going to do? He learned a very valuable lesson. Don't trust Dad, because Dad is bad at logistics. At least I didn't screw up my own deck list, I don't think. They didn't check me, because it's a random spot checks. So,
got it.
So, for all I know, I bombed it super hard. But so he learned that, and I think a good lesson to take from that is, and I'll look to hear about Warhammer or some of your other experiences, but like just pay attention to the logistics, of the tournament. Like not everything is just casual. I think a lot of parents assume, maybe gamer parents or games adjacent parents, like that might be listening to this show, might not necessarily assume, oh, it's just a game, it's fine, just go. And like we know, like all right, we got to prepare or plan. But I think that's an important thing is learn the logistics and talk to and communicate, because we could have gotten our questions answered had we not been overconfident. What's it like at a Warhammer at a Warhammer tournament?
So Warhammer tournaments are they're a lot of the same, where you have to, in your registration package, have your army laid out, and you have to have all of your minis accounted for in squads, and you have to be at a certain point count. So depending on the tournament that you're participating in, like Astronomicon in Vancouver was, I think it was 2,500 point armies.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of other tournaments that it can go all the way up to 5,000, and it gets pretty gnarly. Or it did back when I used to play. And that was a number of years ago. It's been a good 15 years since I've done a Warhammer tournament. So yeah, you have to register your army. You can't screw that up. You have to have a fully painted army, which means that it has to be 3 colors on each, like 3 unique colors on each model that you're putting on the table. The model has to accurately represent what it is that's on your army list. So if you have a model on the table that has a heavy flamer as its gun, and you in fact are saying it's a heavy bolter, like that's a point against, I don't even remember what the composition of that would look like. I think it's army composition, because you're judged on a number of different things, so that at the grand tournament you could win the grand tournament as best general, and that's if you are the best general and you don't get any like significant demerits throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad is a huge Warhammer fan, and he got me and my brother into it when we were really young. And he used to go to grand tournaments all the time, and he would come back with, like, he'd get close to Best General. I think he walked away with Best General once when he went to Winnipeg. I'm so ferociously Canadian.
You definitely are. You definitely are.
Yes, very true.
Let's just wait until the video game podcast when NHL is coming out. Then it's gonna be all.
I'll just yell about hockey.
Yeah, we'll have a.
I'm an old man when it comes to hockey. I just yell at the television a lot, and I scream at my team because they're terrible. I love them anyway. So yeah, that's what that looks like. I mean, depending on the tournament that you're going to, you usually have a bunch of categories that you're judged on. So best painted army, best general, best sportsmanship. My little brother won best sportsmanship one year when we went to Astronomicon. And there's a few other things in there as well. The best sportsmanship one is the best one to win, because it means that you were the best to play with, and it means that even if you lost, you still ensured that the game was fun, instead of getting really upset. So those are all interesting ways that competitive play comes to fruition with Warhammer 40K specifically. I've never played in a Warhammer Fantasy tournament before, because I was always into 40K.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what 40K looks like. That's the tabletop stuff. And I remember having to register my deck in Magic way back in the day, like 20 plus years ago. So
that has not changed.
No.
The cards have changed.
Yeah,
we got some double-sided stuff, some double-sided shenanigans. It's fine. They transform. It's cool. It's fine.
The interesting thing about what old school, because I looked back at what old school PC tournaments would look like.
Yeah.
And there would be like, I would go to a convention. My dad used to host, like, he ran a big convention every year in my hometown. He was that guy. So I would go play in the competitive Quake tournament, and it was all about, some people brought their own computers, some people didn't, and they just hopped onto whatever it is that we rigged up, and they were good computers at the time.
Yep.
And back then it was weird because the hardware was a part of the package as much as the software and the player were. And these days, when you do competitive play, it's mostly about your account.
Mm-hmm.
And it has very little to do with, like, do I have to haul my rig? Because more than likely, if you're on a professional esports team, that rig is already going to be there no matter what.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, Super League Gaming is doing a cool job with how they're helping kiddos to get into competitive gaming like that too. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's like it's interesting watching the profiles for some of like the esports teams, and like the competitive. I forget the name of it, but there's one that gets together and does some of that. Like they rent out theaters and they play with kids. And they do it in the Boston area. I think it's really the advantages of competitive play for games, and just kind of now that we've talked about some of the logistics and some of our personal stories, I think the advantages are clear to us. And I think they are. I think the biggest thing that I want to say is that I don't think that they are as dissimilar from the advantages of competitive play, like for a sport, as a traditional sport, as some people might assume. Especially if you're playing a team-based game. But like, even the individual games, like playing Magic. That's a single. You're one person, but there's a lot to be learned from being in that kind of environment, and not just from learning from the game. And we can talk for hours about what you can learn from Magic or what you can learn from like a tabletop Warhammer, like a miniature strategy game. We could talk for hours about that, but just the different kind of learning that you get from, like just being in a competitive environment is something that it's hard to overstate. So I think, poise under pressure, is something that a lot of people don't have. And I think it's because they never played in a Magic tournament, and it shows. So to steal the Twitter meme, but like, the idea of, okay, you're stressed out and you have to get from place to place really quick and sit down and set up and play. Even though you're playing a game, in that moment, it doesn't matter. In that moment, everybody's following the same accepted rules of engagement. So there it's work. You got to go. You have to follow the social contract, right? Like you got to get to where you go and shake your hands with your opponent, and play. And the thing about a lot of paper games as opposed to digital games, right? Like, if you and I are playing Street Fighter, it would be hilarious because we're both bad. But
it would be.
But the computer does all the work, right? I pick Ryu, you pick whoever, we fight. When one of our life total goes to 0, they fall down 3 rounds. Like, you know what I mean? The game is done there. Like Magic, if we're playing paper Magic, which I say paper Magic, that's relevant because there is MTG Arena, which we've talked about before, and that's a digital form of the same game. But if we're playing paper Magic sitting at the table and we just like put our decks in front of us, unless the two of us communicate clearly while we are playing, nothing happens. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think that that's relevant too, is that it really does kind of force you to learn how to communicate clearly with other people. And to a degree, you have to learn how to communicate with people without like giving too much away, right? But I think there's value in that too. Being able to speak and just be clear while also being kind of guarded. I think there's value in that because there's plenty of situations where it's okay. You need a poker face. And I think some of those types of situations, like in tournaments, help. I mean, the thing that I talk to Evan about all the time is, bro, you mumble. Like he mumbles. He'll just be, he'll be just chatting. He'll be like, well, I do this thing and I got this. And I'm like, what? What did you do? And now I can't get mad at anyone for saying I do the thing because I do that a lot. But like in Magic, if you say I'm going to play this to do the thing, that is not okay.
No,
You have to say,
like,
I
what
tap.
thing are you doing?
Exactly. I have to tap these things to put this much mana into my pool, and then I will cast this. And then wait to see if they have responses. And
yeah, it's half like narrating your experience when you're sitting down and you're streaming a game.
yeah.
But it's important because you do have to have that back and forth with the other player, and it doesn't matter what kind of game that you're playing competitively. If it's a tabletop game, doesn't matter if it's a war game or if it's a card game or whatever. You still need to communicate what it is that you're doing on your turn to a certain degree.
Yeah. And also, and I think this is kind of a hidden thing, and it's just kind of like I'm letting my mind kind of wash over some of the thoughts. Like, you're going to play in tournaments with people that you really don't like, right? And that you would normally just not speak to. And that's okay, right? Like, if you're not jiving with somebody, like, you're in general under no obligation to speak to them. But in a tournament, you gotta, which simulates another environment. Like, if you're working with somebody you don't really like, but you gotta work with them, you have to be able to communicate. And I think there is an advantage to kind of pushing against that discomfort, even if it doesn't necessarily provide like a skill that you can kind of match. Like, being able to say, okay, this is not someone that I particularly want to deal with, but I must, because it's either this or I drop out. And no, you don't want to drop for
Same
that.
sort of thing in professional situations. I mean, that helps if you're letting your kids play in competitive tournaments. I mean, teaching them that they're always going to have to interact with folks that they may not like or they may not even respect. You know, that speaks wonders to what they could potentially be dealing with in their careers. I mean, there are people that I don't like, that I don't particularly respect, that I have to work with on a regular basis. Not, you know, maybe not directly, maybe not every single day, but I still have to work with them, and I still have to make peace with the fact that I have to work with them. And I can't just, like, get upset and opt out, because that would mean that I was going to quit my job.
Yeah, it'd be super weird, because then I'd be on the podcast all by myself. I can't. I mean, so I'm glad that you push through that once a week.
No, I would. No, I'd still be on the podcast. You can't get rid of me.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. That's it. So I'm just. You missed the. Did the joke go over your head, or did you just reject it because I was being self-deprecating again? Okay.
I rejected your joke.
That was a counterspell targeted at my joke while it was on the stack. That was a magic joke. Yeah. So all right. So I think all those are, you know, really. I mean, I think these are just some of the benefits and advantages. Benefits and advantages. That's the same word basically. I think the challenges to a lot of this is competitive play is expensive. You know, and that's just. It is.
Because it requires travel.
Exactly. You know, there's the travel. There is, you know, at least the two games we talked about, Warhammer and Magic. Neither of them are cheap to play competitively.
Although Warhammer is a lot less expensive than it used to be, thank goodness.
Yeah, they were telling you stuff about that at Toy Fair, right? I walked away because I had to go to another thing, but I know they were talking to you about how they realized that not only did they realize that they were pricing themselves out, but also, you know, plastic is cheaper than metal. Duh.
Yeah, The big problem is that they were marketing to a very different audience. Well, they're marketing to a very different audience than what they were before. Like, before they were marketing to, like, collectors and folks that had been playing, you know, different kinds of war games already, and they were used to a very specific kind of model, and they just didn't really adapt because the executive team wasn't interested in adapting. They just wanted to do things the exact same way, and then they ended up losing market share to you know, the other tabletop war games that are out there, and there are a lot more these days. There weren't back in you know, 1994. So yeah, they had to adapt. And let me tell you, plastic is a lot cheaper, especially with 3D printing these days.
Yeah.
Mass printing.
Yeah, Magic it's interesting. So it's interesting we talk about the cost, because Magic. So, we just got done making decks for me and for Evan, and even one for Jake. And what's really interesting about Magic is that I'll never say that it's like a budget-friendly game necessarily, competitive Magic, But what Wizards has tried to do, because they recognize the cost issue, what they have tried to do, and it's with varied level of success, is as they put out sets of cards, they try to have at least a couple of viable archetypes exist with cards in like common and uncommon rarities that, you don't necessarily need, 35 mythic rarity cards that are all, $10 a piece. Those exist just because there's nothing to really do, right? Like, you make a pile of the best cards in the format, and they're gonna win. But literally, I played a deck that was full of commons, and I did fairly well for myself. Yeah, no, the Magic, it is interesting in that you can, if you make some of the right decisions, pilot. They do try and make at least a couple of decks function. And right now there are a couple of decks that are mostly relatively inexpensive cards. Like I think my deck was put together entirely start to finish for I think $30, maybe a little bit more.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
It's not. But then I sat across the table in round 1 against the guy who the first card he played was worth more than my deck combined. So, like, Magic is weird. So...
It's the same sort of thing with Hearthstone, too. Like, collectible card games are weird like that. It depends on how much money you're willing to sink in to get the best cards.
Correct. That is the downside to competitive play, is that in order to be truly competitive, if you really want to be at that top table, it is expensive. And there's really not much to push away from that. The good news is a lot of friendly local game stores have tournament settings with different rule sets. For example, draft. You can go to a draft.
Is a great way.
Yeah. A lot of friendly local game stores know for a fact that Magic and Warhammer are expensive, so they will do events where maybe they have loaner armies that you can use, or or they will do a draft, or they will have a tournament where you can't play with certain cards, or they'll play Commander, which is a fully casual format. And lots of other little things like that. The best thing is if your kids are interested in playing competitive games like Warhammer and Magic the Gathering, etc., Pokemon, find your local game store and talk to them about it.
Pokemon.
They'll tell you, the competitive Pokemon scene is insane. So I think the next time we have a free video game week, I think we should probably talk about esports. Maybe we can get a guest and talk about some esports.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I know so many people that play esports.
Yeah, so let's do that. So I think that has been episode 168. Folks, Amanda and I, we rapped about it a little bit, but I'm sure we didn't think of everything. So I'd love it. We'll certainly do a follow-up episode if you like. So send us your thoughts or share them in the Engaged Family Gaming community. You can get there by going to engagedfamilygaming.com/community. And share with us your thoughts on competitive play. Again, this was us just kind of spinning a yarn, talking about it. But I'd love to hear what you have to say, or maybe what some of your experiences are. I know a lot of folks that have played various games competitively at various levels. So I'd love to hear what they have to say. So until next time, Amanda and I, we do appreciate you listening. We hope you had as much fun as we had recording it. But I do have 2 favors I'd like to ask. 1, everyone listening to this show knows someone who needs to hear it. So I'm not super concerned with how you do it as long as it is legal, but please get the podcast in front of as many people as possible. A bigger audience means more opportunities for Amanda and I to do cool stuff. And if you can't find anyone to have listened to the podcast, share it out on your wall. You never know who might be interested in it. Tweet it out, do whatever you got to do. But if you can't do those things, a review would be amazing. A review on your podcast service of choice, gives us gives us more exposure, which will give us a bigger audience, which then in turn lets us do more cool stuff. So I will be back next week for video games with a different co-host. Amanda is going to try and help me find a co-host for next week, while she is off doing her real work.
Being very stressed out at GDC.
And you made an announcement this afternoon, or this evening.
Did.
Would you care to make that announcement? Can you talk about it now? Can we do that? Can we do this thing?
We can do the thing. Yeah. So I'm gonna be on Kind of Funny while I'm in San Francisco. So I'm gonna be hanging out with Greg Miller, and we're gonna do Kind of Funny Games Daily together, which is kind of serendipitous because I work for Game Daily Biz. So
Are you guys you're gonna make that? You guys, yeah, you're definitely gonna make that joke.
We're gonna 100% make that joke.
You're going to make that joke. He's probably going to yell that joke. He's definitely going to yell a lot.
It's true. He yells a lot. But it's a very endearing yell. It's not like a scary yell. Yeah. So I'm okay with it. It's just a very, it's a Greg yell. That's all I know how to describe it as.
So our fans are definitely going to want to take a look. And at the very least, download the podcast. It's Kind of Funny Games Daily. Next Friday, I will be watching it live because I wouldn't miss that for the world. And we might be we may keep your eyes on our Twitter feed and all that. We may be doing something to celebrate because it's not very often that someone who is one of my best friends in the whole wide world gets to go on the biggest podcast in the world. So I might want to celebrate. So we might throw a party. So
I love parties.
Well, I mean, we'll be having the party at home while you're working. So, but we'll include you.
Pictures.
Yeah, we'll take pictures. So, folks, hope you have a great week. We will talk to you next time. But until then, don't forget to get your family game on. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Engage, a family gaming podcast.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week.